from SE Underground, and I am here with Danny Travis Brown.
What's up? How's it going, Paul?
It's great to have you here, Danny. For those who haven't experienced Danny before, Danny, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Danny Travis Brown. I've been in SEO for about 11 years. I started as an apprentice in an SEO agency a long time ago, sort of worked my way up through the agency to SEO manager. I was then head of SEO at WeBandyCar.com for just under 4 years. Wow. So I got some really good big brand experience working in very competitive search landscapes. And then I left to partner in an SEO agency. I joined an agency that essentially had one client, and it was just one guy. He was sleeping on the floor of his office, and we scaled an SEO agency together from one client and just the two of us to having 14 staff and more clients than I can count or remember. But really, what we refined was a strong sales process during that time, including everything from lead generation to auditing to closing clients on calls and making sure that we were bringing the right clients on. So I learned a lot of lessons during that time. That's sort of going to be my contribution to this year's conference.
Oh, fantastic. We'll come to that in a little while about what you're going to be talking about. But what about the darker side of SEO? How did you get into that side, Danny?
So that really came down to awareness, really. I think there was I was raised as a white hat SEO in the agency where I started, and we were very much drinking the same Kool-Aid as most SEOs are still drinking now. But it really seemed like a lot of the competitors that we were dealing with were doing things that were clearly not the whitest of white, but they were ranking, and they still continue to rank to this day. And the more that I learn and the more that I sort of opened my eyes and ears to Black Hat and really wanted to know what is the limit of things, where can you get away with it? Where do the ethics sort of start to cross lines and stuff like that? I really wanted to learn about the things that are working quickly and what are competitors doing to go, someone that's just entered a marketplace 12 months ago is all of a sudden ranking #1. And it's a very clear trajectory when you have a look at that in SEMrush and stuff. They were just flying, and you start to do a bit of an analysis and you go, well, the ranking and the backlinks aren't the cleanest. And then you start to look at the backlinks to their backlinks and stuff. And you go, right, so they're building links to links. That this is a world that I just need to understand. So it was really just a thing of awareness for me and being able to explain to clients why someone might just flung to the top of the rankings. And that we just sort of went from there, really.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing. And once you start scratching the surface, the layers of complexity that can go on beneath a few simple backlinks are quite unbelievable, aren't they?
Yeah, definitely. It's an interesting world, and I'm always learning. I've been doing SEO a long time, but I'm always learning, particularly when it comes to the black hat stuff. And I put my black hat on today actually for this call. But
you did that.
And just learning so much more about even things like engagement at a local level and how those things can be encouraged and things like that is all really fascinating to me. And the more that you experiment with these things, the more that I seem to be feeling out the perimeter of the algorithm, you start to find the edges of it, so to speak, until you can kind of see its shape. So when you start to approach it from all these different angles and you see the sorts of testing that gets done in the Black Hat community, you really start to pull the curtain back on the algorithm and you actually see what it is that it's looking for, which is very interesting.
Yeah, I think it is quite an interesting thing, because although we know that the algorithm changes shape, it only changes shape probably 5 or 10% perhaps in the course of a year. So being able to really understand the constraints of an algorithm, what it can and can't really do, because there's also a lot of scaremongering, isn't there, with the algorithm?
Yeah, there's a lot of propaganda, I think. I remember it must be 5-6 years ago now. I think Matt Cutts did some sort of press release where he's like, right, guest blogging, stick a fork in it. That was the term that it came out. Stick a fork in it, guest blogging. People still do it now and get links, and it still works, man. But it's like, oh, Matt Cutts has said we've got to stop. Right, okay, let's stop then. It's like, oh, have you tested it? Have you seen anything drop? No. Oh, okay. So it's funny, really. I think it's just about not looking to Google always for the truth about what works and looking to testing. And the Black Hat community is brilliant for that, because they do so much testing themselves. especially if you can find your way into a community where everyone's sharing results and insights, and I just tried this and this works really well. If you're in communities like that, it's invaluable, you know, and you're getting real world feedback, not necessarily filtered, watered down information from Google in the way that they'd like you to behave.
Yes, and normally quite often when somebody comes out and says, you know, stick a fork in it, you know, guest blocking is, you know, is not cool anymore. Normally what that means is we can't find a way of policing it.
Yeah.
So
it works.
So don't do it because we're telling you. It's a bit like as parents, isn't it? You say to kids, don't touch that oven because it's hot. Normally every kid that has ever been told that goes and actually touches the oven because they need to find out for themselves what that actually means. And I think that when the more curious people in SEO get told, whatever you do, don't look down there, they're going to go exactly and do exactly that. Because
so we're all a bunch of naughty children then, that's what you're saying.
We are all a bunch of naughty. I think that's probably fair to say, and particularly looking at the array of speakers that we've got, I think there's quite a few naughty ones in there.
Definitely, yeah, definitely me. If I'll be surprised if you don't send me out at some point. I'll have to watch through the window.
Do I have to watch out whether or not you're drinking orange juice with E numbers?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'll have to come and sit next to you with fingers on lips, and then when it's my turn to get up and speak, you can let me know.
Hands on heads.
Hands on heads. That's me. Yeah.
So Danny, what's been like, you know, if you had a time machine and you could go back to the start of your SEO career, what would you go and tell yourself at that point?
I think it'd be just to know your worth, really, and to know how valuable you are, especially now. I mean, this is even more relevant now than it was back then. You know, I thought when I started SEO 11 years ago that I was late to the party, and I was like, oh God, right, okay, like people have been doing this forever. But really, especially since COVID, I believe it's really only started to see an emergence as almost like a primary marketing channel. It's, you know, massive brands that were dominating the high street going under, getting bought up. Topshop bought by ASOS, House of Fraser gone. You know, all these like brick and mortar titans are either being bought up by people that are digital first, like ASOS, or they're just shutting down because they didn't take this seriously enough in time. And I still speak with household name brands today that you would not believe are not on top of this shit. Like, it's just unbelievable that they're only just scrambling now to actually get a grip on this. So if I could speak to myself back then, it would really be know your worth and always assess how much you know and how valuable that information is, not only to clients, but also to, if you're working for an agency, know your worth. You know, the agency where I came up, I'm very grateful for the time there. And I had a terrific manager, Jamie, who was really spent a lot of time with me and sort of mentoring me and helping me come up. And I met some other fantastic people along that journey. Kieran Hughes, Dan Roche, all these sort of people that really spent a lot of time with me. But the owner of that agency was very much wanted to compartmentalize you into a box so that you didn't have a wide skill set. He wanted to be, no, you're this guy and you're this guy, and that therefore only means that you're worth 18 grand. And then, you know what I mean? And, you know, and again, starting an apprenticeship with the very first year, £520 a month or something like that back then for an apprenticeship. That's not good. You know, I gave up a job at a restaurant to get to, which was, you know, not the best money in the world, scrubbing grills down and stuff till 3 o'clock in the morning. But I gave that up for the, you know, the tutorial aspect of it. But, you know, even the 5 years that I spent at that agency after that, it was just, massively getting underpaid. So I think once you're able to rank a site, and I'd encourage people as well to have their own sites that they're trying to rank as well. So even though if you're not getting the opportunities to experiment on things in your day job, you should be experimenting on these things in the evening. And then that will give you the confidence to go, actually, no, I know my stuff and I'm worth this. And if I'm not worth it here, especially in today's job market, then I'm definitely worth it somewhere else, because there is a huge talent shortage now. And even, you know, the talent that there is there, they're all getting bought up by these massive groups. You know, they're just paying slightly more than what the going rate is, and everyone just goes to them. So it's a great time to get into this industry as well.
I think you're right. I think it is well, I think we were saying just before we came on air, I think one of the biggest things that most businesses don't understand is that when you boil it all down, it is numbers. Numbers get you sales.
Yeah,
And
100%.
you then added, and conversion rate actually can optimize those sales to rinse more out of the numbers.
Yeah, exactly.
So I 100% agree with your observation there, and I think that's those two things are actually the secret to to the success of any sort of online business. Going back to your point about retail is sleepwalking into the abyss.
Yeah,
fact.
It is. If they're not going digital first, then it won't be long.
And a lot of them aren't even going digital at all. And particularly, I funnily enough, I do a sort of like part of my care in the community. I do I do a lot of consultancy to local businesses. Many of them are retailers. They don't see it coming. They are still holding on to the hope that the high streets will return to the 90s at some point in the not too distant future.
It's never going to happen. It's a generational thing as well. So, as when my grand stopped going to the high street, then the footfall is going to be even less. Like, some of the local towns in my area of Manchester, you go there now and it's just a ghost town. Like there are barely even like chains like Greg's, or like bookmakers and stuff like that are the only things that are really hanging on. Like small independent retail stores are all but dying off.
Absolutely. And they can't they don't understand why, and they don't understand what they can do about it. And I've been a big advocate, particularly in the local area, to consider a digital high street, consider amalgamating a collection of businesses into like a super website that you could then market a lot more efficiently, have kind of like a Deliveroo kind of thing so that stuff could be delivered out, click and collect so that stuff can be collected, all of that type of stuff, because they're the only things that you can compete on. You can only compete on, can you get the stuff out faster than Amazon? If you can get the stuff out faster than Amazon, people will probably pay a premium price for it.
Yeah.
If you can't, then you need to have a good hard look at it. And I've said to retailers, I know I'm going on a bit of a rant about it, but I've said to retailers, we need to go back to how deliveries and customer service was in the 50s, where we had a boy on a bike delivering bread, delivering meat, because that was excellent value for money. That was excellent value added service. And I think that a lot of retailers have completely disregarded what they need to do to stay ahead of the massive competition. And being online and doing what you've said is definitely the way to help protect yourself.
Definitely. You even see that with things like grocery stores now. There's lots of like branded mopeds flying around now, with the cool box on the back delivering groceries. For like same day and next day delivery and things like that. And it's just the way that it's going, unfortunately. I mean, like even look at things like TK Maxx, like their latest TV ad campaign is all about TK Maxx who's got a website. That's the message. TK Maxx has got a website. He's like, are you fucking kidding me? TK Maxx should have had a website 15 years ago, mate. Like, don't brag. Like, just roll it out quietly and say TK Maxx always had a website. Don't check. Don't use the Wayback Machine, man. We always had it. Don't worry about it. So, but it's just how it is. That's an example of a big brand late to the party but catching up. And it's just the way it's going.
Because they know it's not coming back. And just like we can say that the world has sleptwalked into an energy crisis. The world, the UK particularly, but the world, the world over, is sleepwalking into losing all of its shops and all of the supporting stuff. Because I know everyone says, like cafes are safe and stuff, but they're not, because people use the cafes when they go to the shops. So when people stop going to the shops, they will then stop going to the barber in the middle of the town. They'll stop going to the coffee house in the middle of the town, because no one's actually needing to go there.
Yeah.
So
it's very much like a through service, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a it's a value added. I mean, my recommendation, by the way, was to the town is get 10 electric vehicle points put right into the center of the town,
Nice
because
idea.
then you've got a captive audience for an hour.
Yeah, it's a good idea. People are going to kill that time, haven't they? Yeah,
that was my solution.
Yeah, that's a good one. You should sell electric car charge points.
Yeah, because you've got captive audience. That's it. But will they listen? Who knows? But that was just my conclusion. But this isn't about me. This is about you. So sorry about that rant. I just have a real thing about retail and how they just can't see it coming. So getting back to your life in SEO, and by the way, you've certainly had a baptism of fire with taking it from apprenticeship level, doing your time, at several levels through that. So you've probably had one of the most thorough real world SEO experiences with some big names chucked into the melting pot as well. Yeah. So you've certainly seen it from the ground up, and you've learnt what you should be doing, learnt perhaps what you shouldn't be doing, but then learnt that perhaps actually it's quite a good thing to do.
What actually works.
What you should, what works, but then what really works quite well and quite quickly. So out of all of those, you must have had a time where something went catastrophically wrong. So what was your biggest foot in mouth howler?
I'll tell you one. I've got a good one.
What did you learn from it?
So with big brand link building, you typically will go down more of a digital PR route, and like a legit digital PR campaign. There's different ways to approach it, but it's normally taking some sort of data set, turning that into a nice illustration or an infographic, or a nice data set that can be promoted to journalists and stuff like this. And I project managed one that was a survey of how will people spend the time that they get back to themselves when they've got a self-driving car. So this is a survey that we did of the UK public. How will you spend your time? Of course, lots of people said I'd read, I'd do my emails before I get to the office. 10% of the people said I would have sex in a self-driving car. So the right thing to do would be to remove that filth from the data before it goes to journalists, so that they don't lead with that headline. So that was actually the opposite of what we did. And the headline that I think it was the Sun chose to run was 10% of Brits would have sex in a self-driving car, says the name of the brand in question. And then I got to kick up the batty for that one. Oops. But then, listen, man, look at the article, and what you'll find is a link in there from the Sun. So I will say mission accomplished from that. Look, I'll be knocking for my bonus at the end of the quarter. But apparently that was a mistake from a branding perspective. So, but who am I? I just do SEO. So link's a link, especially from the Sun.
And PR's PR, isn't it? Isn't that
PR's PR, man?
All publicity is bad PR.
But they also say no sex, politics, or religion. So broke even on that one, I think.
Oh dear, that. So what did you learn from that, other than make sure you check the data before you put it out to the wider world?
Well, as my granddad would say, measure twice, cut once. So check it and check it again, I think.
Good man. Yes, that is a very good granddad phrase. That is. I like that.
Oh, he's got a few more, but I won't tell you on here.
Yes. Of course, the thing is with all granddads is that they have those brilliant phrases, but they also have all of their prejudices that come from many years ago that also ride along.
Yeah, decades of working on building sites and climbing chimneys and stuff like that. Yeah, it's it builds character. I'll say that.
Builds character. Yes. So what are the best resources that you have and that you use and that you've used through your career, and what are the sorts of things that you're using to help you along your way?
One thing that's been fantastic for me, especially this year, is joining a private mastermind group. So because it's private and it's sort of paid access, I find that it's sort of anything goes, really. No one's keeping any secrets. Everyone's sharing, because it's a smallish community. There's not this sort of thing of, people are going to be sharing these case studies and Google is going to be figuring out what people are actually doing. So in terms of resource, I suppose that's not what you meant in terms of resources, but that would be one of the things that has been most valuable to me, is being in a community of real experts in this field. Like, I know my stuff when it comes to SEO. My strength has always been creative, the content marketing, on-page content development, building topical authority and that sort of stuff. And I've always looked to sort of collaborate with development teams and IT teams when it comes to the technical side of things. Of course, I've always done the audits and the page speed stuff. When it comes to technical implementation, I always find it's a much better use of my time to work on a consultancy basis when it comes to tech, and then focus my actual time on implementation on content, creative side of SEO, digital PR, content marketing campaigns, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, in terms of resources, a closed mastermind group has just been absolutely invaluable, because, you know, when things are open and out there, you know, like Matt Diggity, there's so many people that are out there that are fantastic, but everyone's also got access to their free content.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, that it doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't necessarily give you the edge, because the second that someone says, oh, do this, everyone's going to change and start doing that. Not everyone, but hopefully you can see the point. So yeah, that would probably be
the smart ones.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. The smart ones. So not me.
No, but you're looking for the trapdoor. You're looking for the next big thing, and the thing that people have already started talking about, but quietly.
Exactly. Yeah. So like the guys that are taking to YouTube and spilling the guts, the stuff that they shout about for free, it's not the same stuff that they're talking about behind closed doors. And that's the stuff, you know, that where they find the most value. They've decided that that's the stuff to keep private. So therefore, that's the stuff that seems to have the biggest impact, you know.
Yeah, and of course, you know, that's the kind of stuff that we'll be talking about on the 4th of October. Is you know, being able to find out more about some of those things that aren't being widely spoken about publicly, and the reason they're not is because they have far more efficacy being kept under wraps and being used by a few people, and don't draw attention to themselves.
That's it. Yeah, that's the value that you get. And I was at the SEO Underground last year, and I learned so much. That's why I was so keen to get in touch about potentially speaking this year.
Yeah.
I learned so much, and the roster of people had so much valuable insights to share. It was fantastic. Like, I left and my notepad was absolutely stacked. So that, you know, you get what you pay for at the end of the day. You know, some people are always going to save the best tips for a private community, and that's what this is.
Yeah, and that's so your recommendation to sort of SEOs who are just getting out there or looking to take next steps and perhaps setting out on their own and things like that, is to find those sorts of communities and join like-minded people who are all kind of have the same sort of vested interest, who have been there, done that, and who are trying new things out all the time, because it is a shifting landscape, isn't it? That's the beauty of it.
Yeah.
Is while there's sort of the staple things that we all know, you know, content, backlinks, so on and so forth, you know, the technical side of it as well, there are so many shades of grey out there that are shifting all the time, that sometimes are effective, and not because, you know, the search engines are changing it, but just because things lose their effect over time. You know, things just aren't you know, as powerful, and it could be a whole raft of reasons as to why it happens. But that's
absolutely
sounds good to me. So are you listening to anyone in particular at the moment? Is there anyone that sparked your interest? Maybe some?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the main places that I'll look for: Craig Campbell, his YouTube channel is fantastic. Chris Palmer as well. I learned a lot from Chris Palmer, especially when it comes to local GMB optimization and essentially putting a standard operating procedure together, really, for local. A lot of what I've put in there, or I've developed that on top of what I already knew, has come from Chris Palmer.
Yeah.
Matt Diggity is very good. Corey Tugberg has really opened my eyes to topical authority development and thinking about a subject or an entity as a collective of topics, and you know, how to decide what you should be writing about, rather than just sort of coming up with, you know, what you might deem to be topical content. It's what does Google deem to be topical content, and how is it currently reflecting its understanding of a keyword or an entity or a product within a network of items, so that was very, very valuable, and something that I'd say is probably one of the biggest lessons that I've had in the past couple of years, is thinking about topics and content in this way.
Have you found recently that I mean, I know that there's been a big shift to not having these skyscraper content articles, although there's still a place for them, but think the landscape's shifted more, and actually what the search engines seem to appreciate more is shorter articles that are interlinked to one another.
I think it depends on the intent. I think it really depends on it. So if it's something that's more, how far is the sun from Earth? Okay, well, you could sum that up in a 5,000 word article, or you could probably sum it up in a sentence.
Yeah.
So I think it's just about having concise, rich, snippet worthy segments within there, and then also having a broader, deeper explanation and understanding, as well. So it depends on the intent of the keyword, but it also, I think it's more to do with the network of information on that site in general. So, okay, how far is probably a bad example that I've come up with on the spot, but how far is the sun from Earth is one thing, but then what is the sun? What's the sun made of? How hot is the sun? How cold is it in space? Or, whatever. But these are things that are semantically related that Google seems. It doesn't just need. You can't just have a website with 2 articles on there. Google's like, I'm going to rank this one. It's like, no, this is an authority on space and planets and all this sort of thing. I don't know why I've come up with this example, because I don't know anything about astronomy and all that stuff. But you see what I'm saying, right? It's like, it's more to do with, okay, this is one of a network of informational pieces that are factually accurate, and this website itself looks to be an authority. Therefore, I will rank this one particular article.
Yeah, and that was kind of really what I was sort of driving at, was that rather than having, so unfortunately we'll continue on with the sun analogy, but you sort of said about the fact that there were what is the sun, where is the sun, how hot is the sun, what's the nearest planet to the sun, and things like that. Now, going back not very long ago, you would have one super article that would probably have lots and lots of H2s all the way down it, explaining that in step by step. But of course, the danger with that is that there is, at any point, you can move out of phase and the search engines wouldn't understand where it is, what it is. But my kind of question was more about, have you noticed now how that seems to be being split out into sort of sub documents, if you like, or articles that stand on their own?
And I think it's better to do that as well, because everything that's worth discussing, if it's got its own page, it can have its own H1. It can have its own URL. If you're going to throw everything into a long form piece and everything is an H2, there's not going to be any secondary keyword in the URL. Everything you're going to be trying to optimize for in an H2 or an H3 if you're doing it through an FAQ accordion.
Yes.
So to me, having these smaller, not short form, but just essentially dedicated individual pages, it just allows for you to build a silo, essentially. So that, whether that's supporting a top page or if it's just a topical cluster of informational pages, whatever. But having dedicated pages just means that each one can have its own H1, its own URL, and so on, its own title tag, you know.
And stands the chance of being found on its own for its own reasons, rather than being part of a super document that that may or may not get indexed.
Exactly.
And of course, you're then not putting all your eggs in one basket. So it makes perfect sense from a content perspective as to why splitting these out and then putting decent backlinking, a good backlinking structure in place makes a lot more sense. But it does seem to have been a fairly recent shift, because for the past few years, it's all been about making these skyscraper articles that kind of are the authority on everything, without actually putting it into the context of having sort of clustered data or clustered articles behind to kind of take people on a journey, to help people learn more.
Yeah, and every time you have an individual page like that as well, it's another opportunity for an internal link. So if you're creating a silo underneath a parent page, so let's say you've got your top page that you're looking to rank, and then you create 20 informational pages, rather than having all that content on that one page, you split that out into 20 informational pages that sit within that section. That's opportunities for 20 internal links with that anchor text, your primary keyword anchor text pointing to your parent page. So doing it that way even actually presents a better opportunity for internal linking as well.
Yeah. And I guess a clearer picture and a clearer map for the search engines to tag onto, and to be able to understand that you are an authority. Because look, you've written 16 articles on the Sun, as opposed
exactly, yeah.
So we'll all be going off and learning all about the Sun when we finish.
No, yeah. Sorry, everyone. It's boring.
I also I do love space, but I think thinking about it, I know absolutely nothing about the Sun, nowhere near enough.
Yeah. Well, there's only one way to find out. We need a big spaceship, a lot of SEOs,
and probably some suntan cream.
Some suntan cream, yeah, and some slush puppies.
So moving on from the people you're listening to and the people you're paying attention to at the moment, what's the biggest SEO black hat myth that you'd like to grab hold of people and say that's not the case?
I'd say probably that don't buy backlinks is the big one. Like that's the big crowning jewel of Google's propaganda crown. I think it's I was following that sort of thing back then, and then I had my manager, who I mentioned earlier, he went off to like a big agency, and they were dealing with actually, a big retail brand, one of the ones that I mentioned earlier, actually, and he was like, everyone's buying links, mate. Everyone's buying links. He was like, once you get to this level, he's like, it's in the budget. They just say, well, how much do we need to budget for backlinks? And the thing is, you shouldn't buy backlinks on a site that you wouldn't want to link from in the first place. You should still qualify a site in terms of whether or not it's relevant enough and authoritative enough, and it's got a good amount of traffic, as to whether or not you should want a backlink from it. It's just the case that these webmasters or journalists or bloggers or whatever it is, they know that these links have a monetary value. Now, back when I first started SEO and I was doing manual outreach for hours and hours and days, it used to work. It used to be a fair exchange of value, that you would produce a really nice content piece for them, be it a guest blog or an infographic or a data set or whatever it was. And you would contribute that, under the agreement that there would be a link that sits within that article. That was 10 years ago. And now, through just being hammered with outreach requests, and they know that this is an SEO thing, really. So they're always going to have a price sheet that they're able to pull out and say, absolutely. And here's my prices for sponsored posts. It's 150 quid. It's 200 quid.
Yeah.
Even anyone that writes editorial pieces, especially journalists now, there's actually a really good book called Trust Me, I'm Lying, that talks a lot about journalists and how they
Who wrote that? That sounds like a good book.
I can't remember. It's been a while since it's been a while since I've read it, but he talks about how he's able to get press coverage and things like that. So, for example, he was doing a PR for someone that had a documentary coming out. It was something like quite controversial. So he had a billboard printed for this, put up, and then he himself spray painted it saying, boycott this film, shouldn't be doing this. He took a picture of it, then sent that to journalists and said, have you seen this, that someone's done over this thing? I think this is quite controversial. And then he gets all the coverage, and he just did all of it himself. So what I'm saying is that journalists are paid on ad revenue now. They're incentivized around ad revenue because the publications they write for make their money now from ad revenue. Not many people are selling papers anymore. So it's about, that's why everything's about Kardashian's backside and all this sort of thing. It's because really, cut it whichever way you want, but it gets clicked. And on those pages is AdSense blocked, and stuff like this. So journalists now are incentivized to sensationalize things. That's why fake news is an epidemic, in my opinion. And also, they'll take incentives outside of that as well to publish these things. And that's just the way that the game has evolved, unfortunately. So people saying don't buy backlinks is delusional. It just needs budgeting for and planning for in advance. And it needs doing in such a way that's still in the, it's still clean, it still looks clean, it's still good coverage. It's not, there's no like drop off in value or like, authenticity at any point just because you're paying for it. It's just the price of admission now. But
Yeah.
all the quality has to remain high. The standards have to remain high and the
Yeah.
same. It's just for the most part, it's the way it is. Unless, you know, you have a client where they're producing something really, really valuable, like a calculator that doesn't exist, or something that is really doing something that stands out that's just bound to get coverage, then that's great. But that's, especially for clients with a tight budget, it's often not always the case.
It's and let's be honest, it's a bit of a unicorn, isn't it? Because
Of course it is,
content being that valuable is few and far between. Content being quite valuable, you know, and serving a purpose, that's a lot more commonplace. But yeah, people going, yeah, no, I'll just put that onto my site for absolutely nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And
you know, it's not gonna.
Some of the clients you end up working with as well, it's not always the easiest to make, you know, content marketing stuff that's going to get clicks. Like I used to have a client years ago that did polymer O-rings, like rubber seals that goes in deep sea mining and drilling equipment.
Who doesn't need a polymer
O-ring with that? What am I supposed to do with that?
That's all I'll say.
Yeah.
We've all had them.
10 top tips for using polymer O-rings in deep sea drilling equipment. Like, well, what we're gonna do? Make an infographic about this? Like, it's not gonna work.
Wow.
So yeah, sometimes you just have to grease the wheels and buy links, and it works as long as you maintain your standards when you're doing it.
There's more to polymer O-rings than this.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, that's a tough one. That is a tough crowd. That is.
It is, yeah. Well, you know,
for polymer O-rings.
Got to pay the bills, aren't you?
Well, you know, I'm sure you succeeded, and I'm sure they got more business as a result of it.
You did, yeah. More O-rings than they knew what to do with.
Then it was mission accomplished. So,
yes.
So on the flip side of that, what are the hot subjects in SEO that you think need tackling?
AI. It's all about AI now, isn't it? That's all anyone's talking about is AI content and AI image generators. Have you tried one of those AI image generators?
I haven't done the image generator. I've had a lot of stuff with content generating.
Yeah, they are brilliant. It's scary actually how good they are. So I think this is going to be something, you know, it's only in the early stages really of development. AI content creators,
right,
has only really been a big thing for like a year that people have been seriously using it and talking about it. Give that another 2 years. I mean, like Google helpful content update that's just come out, so says, you know, is raising the bar on AI content, but it's to do with really wrangling these AI things and just making sure it's producing something that is helpful content. But as long as you're doing the research and the briefing to these tools in advance, then I just don't see how it's distinguishable. Like, you know, if you could sit down with any client and say, tell me about what you do, tell me about your product, tell me about your service, and you can extract that value from them, then communicate that to the AI, then have it write the content, then it will produce helpful content. Yeah, it's just the connecting words and language and the structure of it really. But as long as you're giving it the due time and attention for research and then changing the structure of it and making sure it's got a nice balance of synonyms and related language and terminology, then that's helpful content. You know, it just has to have that human consideration as well. So I think, I like it. You know, I think it's a great opportunity for content writers to become AI content wranglers. Really, I said this I did an interview on Diary of an SEO with Kira a couple of months ago, and I was saying this to her. Like, she was saying, well, a lot of people are scared that it's going to put them out of a job. I said, well, you know, they shouldn't be. They should see it as an opportunity to evolve now and become on the forefront of AI, driving an AI basically, or a farm of AI. So I think AI will get to a point where it's indistinguishable. It almost is. And the image generator is very fun as well. Mid-Journey AI image generator is a lot of fun to play with and scary. And even that is still in beta. So give it 2 more years. And I think iStock and stuff like that are going to be going out of business.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think that is going to be quite a big leap, isn't it? To be able to, if you like, paint your own landscape that's so indistinguishable from a landscape.
Yeah. With a line of text, a descriptive line of text, and things like the aspect ratio and stuff like that you want it to do. And a minute later, it gives you 4 options. You pick one to upscale, and it'll upscale it to the maximum resolution. It's so cool. You know?
Yeah, it is. it is quite thought provoking as to what you could actually do with it, and also, you know, how that application is going to impact, you know, the world of videos, photos, images,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, things like that. Because having seen some of the articles where, you know, I'm sure you've seen them on social media, you know, where they've been told to take the Simpsons and turn them into real people, and
Yeah.
you know, and stuff like that. I mean, very rudimentary at the moment, but it's coming, and
Yeah. 100%.
it's getting there, you know, and
Yeah.
it is quite thought provoking, you know. And when you see like the Tom Cruise AI,
Deep fake. Yeah.
deep fake stuff is, I mean, that's almost indistinguishable, apart from
Yeah.
the odd frame where you think, ah, yeah, now I can see
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
that's becoming
It's
less and
getting
less and
there.
less. You know, when I think back to, I mean, I'm sure you've seen the film Titanic, and there's that now almost
Yeah.
laughable opening where there's kind of like a helicopter shot going over the top of the Titanic, and you can see the very funny little AIs wandering around, or you know, CGI
Yeah.
stuff, which is so obviously CGI.
Yeah.
You know, to where we are now, where you've got almost indistinguishable from the real thing.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's
that's,
someone doing that in a back bedroom somewhere, their own PC. Whereas what would the team look like that worked on those Titanic CGI shots, you
yeah,
know? So, and what was the
absolutely.
budget?
Yeah, the budget and the warehouse full of computer equipment
Yeah.
to generate it. It's yeah, it does absolutely beg a belief, really. But yeah, it is interesting. And also the other thing, going back on to AI content, is I do think that AI content brings out the worst in people, brings out the lazy side, because I
Yes.
think people misunderstood that it would just do it for you. And the reality is it doesn't just do it for you, because otherwise you end up with a lot of repetition,
Yeah.
you know, rephrasing exactly the same thing you've written in the previous paragraph and all of that type of stuff. So it
Yeah.
does take more than just saying, write a little bit about grass, you know, because it's not that clever.
Yeah,
But
and it still requires that phase of competitor content analysis as well. Like
yes,
things like phrase.io are great for creating a content brief because it will pull back the top ranking articles and also show you the structure of those, and you can kind of get ideas for subheaders,
yeah,
sub facets of content that you want to really put into your structure,
yeah,
and you can take that structure and put the correct facts and information and data into the AI brief, and
yeah,
then start to develop it, and you really give it the ingredients, and you've done the research, so you know the spec that the content has to go to, and then you know that it's producing something valuable, and then you go through that process of refining the content and proofreading
yeah,
it, and making sure it's up to scratch. It's
yeah,
just knowing the standard to meet in the first place. I think that's it. The lazy people will just go, we've hit the word count, publish it, and that's really not what it's about at all.
yeah. And I think also it's about people being honest if they use it, because I don't know about you, but I certainly wouldn't appreciate buying content from somebody who is using AI, and you know, but if they were candid enough to say, do you want AI content or do you want it completely, you know, manually written, and by the way, there is a cost differential as a result of it, I think I'd much prefer to have that conversation than
Yeah,
thinking I was getting a 100% humanly generated piece of content, and actually then discovering through you know, through looking at it, that actually it's really been poorly written,
yeah. Well,
and
that's
probably not.
a really good point, isn't it? Because as it stands, you could probably tell from looking at it at the
Mm,
moment, but a day will come where it's just as good. And it's
yeah,
they go through a few more iterations, and then I mean, I don't know what that will look like, but I imagine it's going to be indistinguishable. It's always just going to come down to briefing and just passing that human logic test,
you're
and then
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess, you know, content's the same, isn't it? Really, I mean, you know, if you just turn around and go, "Oh, write me something about, you know, the sun,"
yeah,
you know, you've got to give them people more information, that from reference documents to, you know, what the perspective is that you need people to write from, etc., because
yeah,
otherwise, you know, it's a broad topic. Where do you start? You know, and I think as marketers, we should hold our hands up and say we do ruin a lot of platforms and a lot of things. You know, we do tend to use them to the point that they break, and we do tend to, you know, absolutely rinse them as hard as we can.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, being responsible and ensuring that we use these helpful tools to help rather than replace at this point, with a view to the fact that they probably will replace when they become better.
Yeah, it's just a case of becoming a little bit of a shepherd for them. I think that's the ticket. Yeah, no, learn how to drive them properly.
Yes, yeah, and just use it as a means of being able to get them to do what you would have done in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
But more efficiently.
Absolutely.
So fast forwarding now to 4th of October, you're coming along and you're one of our guest speakers.
Yes.
What are you going to be talking to us about? Can you give us a hint as to
Yeah, sure.
On SEO Underground?
Yeah, no problem. So I'm going to be talking about SEO client lead generation and how to sell SEO. And I really want to be clear that the process that I'm going to be sharing is very introvert friendly. So, you know, I think I'm up against it a little bit because everyone's going to be there, you know, sharing like actual SEO tips. And obviously there are things that I could share and think, you know, wins that I've had and that sort of thing. But really where I thought I could offer a lot of value to the SEO Underground audience and community is talking about how to take the skill set that a lot of them have got and, you know, the skills that they'll be learning at the conference, and then really how to communicate that to prospective clients. So during my 11 years of SEO, obviously I've been agency side initially, and I was in a lot of pitches and I've learned how to sort of do those in a well-rounded way. I was the head of SEO at a big international brand, and I saw some of the biggest SEO agencies in the country coming into pitch. We probably changed SEO agency 4 times during my time there, and every single time that we did that, we probably saw 4 agencies pitch. So I've sat through 16 pitches, and I've seen good ones, and I've seen shit ones, and I've seen okay ones, and I've seen the ones that were quoting a lot of money, and I saw what those look like, and I saw the ones that quoting something not as much, and everything in between, really. So I have a very good understanding of what those things look like. And then when I had my own agency, I really refined a sales process, mostly through initially when it comes to generating leads to begin with. We tried lots of different things, and we spent a lot of money trying to do outbound or outreach and prospecting and generating leads that way, be it through LinkedIn sales, you know, manager, and using you know, someone on a third party basis to do that for us, whether it was through a cold calling service that we spent thousands on, whether it was through cold emails. And really, I'm not saying that those things don't work. I'm sure that there are people out there that have got a great solution for that, and it's going to bring you leads that are really qualified and all this stuff. But my issue is with that stuff that even if you're generating leads through outbound, the next conversation that you have to have with that person is justifying what SEO is, that you're qualified to do it. Then you've got to justify the cost. Whereas if you're bringing leads in, the conversation is entirely different. And I also have a sales process that someone can use start to finish that is very, very fluid, from them contacting you initially to going through an audit process into a close process. And it's super simple. And I'll be teaching that process there basically, and then taking any questions to help people.
Fantastic. Excellent stuff. Well, that certainly sounds like a slot to not miss.
I would hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. It certainly sounds like it's a different type of value, and as I've said myself, it's a vital part of any SEO to survive, is keep getting that business coming through the door.
Yeah.
And a lot of us aren't very good at it, you know, some to lesser and greater degrees, you know. So to hear from somebody who's had success with doing it, I think that is something that we could all learn from, and to glean some help and some understanding as to what the process is.
Yeah, exactly. It's very friendly to people that aren't, you know, not necessarily aren't good at sales. It's just people that are a bit more introverted. And I feel that perhaps in the black art SEO community, there's a decent percentage of people that might not be so comfortable on the phone, which I'm not. I don't like that stuff. So that's why I've came up with this, and it works really well. So
excellent. Wow. Well, thank you ever so much for taking the time, Danny, to to talk to us. I'm looking
My
forward to
pleasure.
seeing you on the 4th of October.
Yeah, me too.
Tickets are selling fast, and I'm looking forward to seeing Danny to tell us all about how to maximize leads and sales in SEO. So thank you very much. Leaves me to say
pleasure.
thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you on the 4th of October, and it leaves me to also thank Danny Travis Brown for taking the time to talk to me today. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
All the best. Take care, everybody. Until the